Hello everyone, I am Connor and I am the Music Fanatic coming to you guys with another review of another album, and today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album, the 6th studio album, well I guess 7th if you want to count their first album, Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat, but in our terms, the 6th studio album by Des Moines, Iowa based heavy metal, alternative metal, kind of new metal band, the 9-piece known as Slipknot, and their newest album, We Are Not Your Kind. And this is the follow-up to, well, kind of not really the follow-up per se, but this is the follow-up album to their album which came out in the year 2015, which was called Point Five, The Gray Chapter. The reason why it was called Point Five, The Gray Chapter is because the longtime bassist for the band, Paul Gray, had passed away a few years beforehand, and it was also the first album that the band featured without their longtime drummer, Joey Jordison, and the album, The Gray Chapter, was basically dedicated to Paul Gray, hence the name The Gray Chapter. My feelings on that album were honestly kind of mixed. I mean, there were really good songs off of that album, like The Devil and I really like the song Skeptic, Sarcastrophe, what's it called? The Negative One. Like, there was really good songs off that album, but, like, the feel of that album wasn't exactly there, to be completely honest. I'm not going to say it was disappointing, per se, but it was it's lower on my tier list of Slipknot albums. So as I stated, this is the 6th studio album released by Iowa-based heavy metal band Slipknot, who, in their very early careers, were kind of, well, they weren't exactly underground. They were underground for a while, and then when they released their first album, the self-titled album, and their second album, which is my personal favorite album, Iowa, kind of just blew up almost overnight. They went from being this weird little band in Iowa that had 9 members and used DJs in their music, well, not at the time when they started, but used DJs and samples and extra percussion instruments, and like kind of had a weird vibe to them, to like overnight, if you said Slipknot, nearly everyone who was in the metal community would know what you're talking about. 5 years have passed since the last album that came out by Slipknot. Real quick, want to correct myself, that album came out in 2014, sorry. So after releasing an album that has critics and fans alike kind of just mixed on what the album sounds like, how do you follow up with that? Well, there was a bit of silence in Slipknot for a while after that album came out. I mean, they were playing shows, and they even released Day of Gusano, I think is how you pronounce it, which is a live album that they did when they were in Mexico. So it was one of the first times, if not the first time, that the band had ever played in Mexico, and it was a live DVD that they released and everything. But other than that, the sign of new music when it came from Slipknot wasn't exactly there. Well, back in Halloween of last year, we got our first taste of a new album by Slipknot in the song All Out Life. Well, there's a bit of a problem with that, and that is that song is actually not featured on this album. The name of this album comes from a lyric off of that, which is We Are Not Your Kind, which is repeated in part of the song. And that song excited a lot of people and excited a lot of fans, me myself, when I heard that song, because I was like, holy shit, I haven't heard Slipknot sound like this intense and kind of like this in a very long time. I'm really excited to hear this album. And then they kind of said maybe they're going to release a new album, and then they announced their new album that was going to be coming, which is this one, We Are Not Your Kind, with the first single off of this album, Unsainted. And then they released the track list off this album, and then everybody basically saw, wait, All Out Life isn't on this album. I wonder why that is. And honestly, I may have read a few things about it, but even I kind of don't know why they didn't put All Out Life. It would have fit like perfectly in part of this album. But All Out Life was basically our first taste of new music by Slipknot. Little time passed, and they released the first single off this album, which is called Unsainted, which is also track 2 off of this album, but technically it's the first track. I'd say it's the first track off this album in quotations, because this album features something that I almost really haven't seen in Slipknot albums before. I've seen intro songs, because every single Slipknot album has an intro song, whether it be the barcode thing that's on the self-titled album, 515 off of Iowa, it's my favorite Slipknot album, I couldn't remember it, or, you know, the song, forgot what that fucking song was called, or like the song XIX off of Point Five, The Grave Chapter. It's not like, unlike Slipknot, to have their first song off an album not even being a first song per se. like just being an intro track and everything. And the first song off this album is called Insert Coin, and then it goes into Unsainted, which is the kickoff of this album. And what a fucking way to start off this album. Unsainted and a few other songs off of this album kind of show a side of Slipknot that honestly we really haven't seen that much in a while, and then I can't really recall in the back of my mind that many songs that are standouts that are in the history of Slipknot in the last few years, and that is, they are just barn-burning fucking thrashy metal songs, and they are just balls to the wall fucking awesome. Unsainted, along with songs like Red Flag and the album Closer, which was also the second single off this album, that's one of the things I really haven't seen by a band all that often. The two singles off of this album are the first and last track. I mean, it's cool, and I'm glad they did that because they're honestly probably the best shining moments off of this album. But I've never really seen a band be like, hey, this is our first single, it's also a first song. Here's our second single, this is the album closer. But just the feel of those three songs, Unsainted, Red Flag, and Solway Firth, like, just... they're mosh songs, basically. Like, the songs just sound awesome. Their choruses. The chorus of Unsainted is really just like the most, I don't want to say it's not operatic. That's not the word I'm looking for. It's like the most epic sounding chorus almost on the entire album. I'd say that and Critical Darling are the two songs that have the most epic sounding choruses off this entire album. But yeah, the thrashy moments and like the balls to the wall moments off of this album, when they come out, they are almost better than you'd expect them to be. But of course, after Volume 3, Volume 3, the Subliminal Verses, came out, they have two of those albums. Sometimes I get them mixed up. After that album, there's kind of also the more groovy type sounding tracks, like the groove oriented or almost like groove metal type oriented tracks off this album. Tracks that are just like Birth of the Cruel, which was the third single off this album. Kind of the song Neo Forte. Orphan is kind of, I'd say it's more of a barn burner, honestly. But there's also those moments of the more groovier type sounding songs. Though I said that the song Unsainted is a barn burner fucking thrash metal track and everything, it also kind of has a little bit of groove feel to it in a way, and I love the track for that too. And as I stated, this album has something that I really haven't seen from Slipknot that much in their career that I can really recall. As I said, there's an intro song off of this album, as there always is. This is the song Insert Coin. But songs like the two songs Death Because of Death and What's Next, those are instrumental interludes. Which if you're a person who's a regular listener of music, it can either be one or two things. Either those can just be filler songs, either they can annoy the shit out of you, or you can be like, oh boy, what's next? Get it? Because the song's called What's Next. And I like Insert Coin for what it is, because it's just an intro track. Death Because of Death is cool, but it's kind of weird, honestly. What's Next, kind of the way the song it sets up, just kind of feels comical and everything, but I don't know, I guess I could not do without the instrumental interludes, but I don't know, I guess they're there, so whatever. I mean, Death Because of Death is kind of catchy, but it's kind of just weird. What's Next is kind of weird, and if anyone were to tell me that Craig and Sid didn't watch the show Stranger Things when they were making this album, I'd probably call bullshit, because the song Insert Coin and the song What's Next, mostly the song Insert Coin, listen to Insert Coin and listen to the main theme song of Stranger Things and tell me they don't sound similar. There's no way that they didn't get that from that. And they didn't steal it, obviously, they're probably just influenced by it, but there's no way that they didn't get that from that. I mean, the song is called Insert Coin. It's basically being like, going up to it almost sounds like the beginning of like going up to an arcade, putting the coin in and playing it. I don't know why, but it just gives off like a weird Stranger Things theme song vibe, I guess. I don't know. And much like what other people have talked about this album features probably the most experimentation that Slipknot has ever had in an album before. And I'll say this, it works and doesn't work at the exact same time. It works because some of the more strange kind of things, wow, I just said Stranger Things and I'm saying that, the more weirder type experimentation that they do and everything on some songs really shines through and really, really sounds good. And then other songs, it's kind of like, I probably could do without this. I'd say the best experimentation song that is off this entire album is Spiders. And I thought I was gonna fucking hate spiders when I first heard the song because I thought it kind of sounded just a little bit stupid. But that song is just so catchy and like it sets up like Slipknot basically made the new song that is going to be on like every single Halloween party playlist in the next few years because it's just so perfect for a situation like that, and it's just so catchy and I don't know. It's the catchiest, one of the catchiest songs that Slipknot has ever made. How many times can you say a Slipknot song is catchy? Well, in this song you can. And there are some softer moments off of this album too. Namely the songs Not Long for This World and A Liar's Funeral. But I'll be just 100% completely honest. The song A Liar's Funeral is probably my least favorite song off this album. Well, actually, my real least favorite song off this album. I'll get to that. But I don't know, the song A Liar's Funeral, when I first heard it, like, it was like an acoustic song. I have no problem with Slipknot going acoustic. I fucking love the song Snuff. That song's amazing. But some people were trying to say that this song almost sounds like it could be a setup to be a sequel to the song Snuff. Lyrical wise, probably, but no. I'm sorry. Snuff stands on its own. Nothing can be the sequel song to that. And mostly I say that just because, like, the tonal shift in that song between them singing and screaming and how it just comes out of nowhere kind of just, I don't know, it makes it feel like two separate songs, but to me, not in a good way. Like, I'm just not a fan of the song, A Liar's Funeral. And the only other reason why I probably wouldn't like the song Not Long for This World is because, again, I have no problem with Slipknot mixing it up in their songs and everything. I mean, the song The Nameless off of Volume 3 of the Subliminal Verses is probably one of my favorite Slipknot songs, and the chorus in that song all of a sudden goes from being like this really loud, bombastic sounding Slipknot song to this really slow, somber sounding, like, acoustic song. But for some reason in the song Not Long for This World, it just doesn't work for me. And I don't know, it just doesn't work for me. And the number one song off this album that 100% does not work for me, literally at all, is the song My Pain. I'm sorry, I don't hate this song, it's just, I get experimentation and I get, like, being outside the box, but, like, be good if you're going to do it, that's what I'm saying. Like, I have no problem with bands experimenting, expound your sound all you want. Just, I want it to be good, that's all. I guess two other things that I would say about this album that I actually do like, that are two pros off of this album, is that the production work on this album is really, really fucking good too. And what I mean by that is, if you listen to a Slipknot album, you're obviously going to be hearing the guitar riffs, which are by Jim Root and Mick Thompson and everything. You're going to be hearing that. They're simple but effective. I mean, if you're a guitar player and you want to learn a Slipknot song, besides the solos, it's probably going to be fairly easy to learn a Slipknot song. They're not that hard. But you can hear that, you can hear the bass, and you can hear the drums on everything. But on some Slipknot albums, especially ones in kind of recent memory, like, so Slipknot has 9 members, and 4 of those members, there's a turntablist, there's a sampler, and then there's 2 percussionists. In recent memory of Slipknot albums, I haven't really been able to hear that much of the turntables or the samples, or even the auxiliary kind of percussion kind of sounding stuff that's on there. On this album, you can hear a lot more of it. Like Craig, you can hear him playing on the piano in some songs in this album. You can hear Sid doing the record scratching on this album. And for almost one of the first times on a Slipknot album that I can actually remember, I can hear the auxiliary percussion. Like, I can hear the extra percussion stuff, like the timpani, and like when they're hitting a keg or something like that. So the production on this album is fucking great when it comes to that stuff too, because the stuff that normally that you probably wouldn't hear that would get like backshadowed and everything and overshadowed by guitar, bass, and drums and everything, you can hear basically all the elements on this album. And this is probably a no-brainer, but, like, I gotta give props to my man Corey Taylor. This is probably one of the best vocal performances he's done in his career of being in Slipknot. When he does his clean-sounding vocals, like on the choruses of Neo Forte and Critical Darling and on Unsainted, like those just epic-sounding choruses, he just sounds amazing on those. And, of course, his screams on this album are just amazing. The best like scream performance that he has on this entire album is probably on the song Soul Wave Firth. I have not heard Corey be that balls to the wall extreme in a Slipknot song probably ever since Iowa, for God's sakes. Like, this album has some of the heaviest moments Slipknot has had ever since Iowa. And I think I mentioned it before, the song Orphan, but I think that song is probably the #1 standout song off of this entire album. That song is just... Basically, I'm just going to say listen to it, because the song is just the best song off the entire album. It blows my mind every time I hear it, and it's probably the song that I go back to the most off of this album. The only con, I would say, that's another thing off this album, is with the experimentation that they do, some songs have an extended intro, have an extended outro, or have an extended middle. So I guess another con that I would probably say is that sometimes when songs are longer than they're supposed to be, in my opinion, like, it's because of those add-on interludes and everything. And for me, it kind of just seems like the songs probably go on for way too long. Like, some songs off this album, I don't feel like they need to be over 6 minutes long, or don't need to be over 5 minutes long, but it doesn't take away from the actual track. The actual track is really good, but even though I like the song Orphan, I kind of wish I didn't have to skip like 45 seconds into the song to hear the actual song. So though it's my favorite song off the entire album, I kind of don't like that I have to like skip almost to like 45 seconds of the song to actually get into it. Even though I really, really do like that bass build up. Still, I've done this in every single video I've ever made when it comes to a review. There are 14 tracks off of this album. I cut albums in half on my favorite tracks, so my seven favorite tracks off of this album in no particular order, just my favorite songs off this album in no particular order, would have to be Unsainted, Nero, Forte, Critical Darling, Red Flag, Spiders, Orphan, and Solway Firth. Those are my 7 favorite songs in no particular order off this album. What are your top favorite songs off this album in no particular order? I guess 7 or 5, whatever the fuck you want to do. Above all, this album's really fucking good. Like, it is basically kind of what I've wanted from a Slipknot album in a very, very long time. Don't get me wrong, I love Slipknot to death, but I will honestly say, without a shadow of a doubt, this may be a controversial thing to say, kind of, but this is the best album by Slipknot since Iowa. Iowa is my favorite album by Slipknot. That album is a fucking modern metal masterpiece. And I can safely say that this is probably the best album they've released since that. I love Volume 3, The Subliminal Verses, but I think this album is better than that. I'm okay with All Hope Is Gone. I'm not a huge fan of A Point 5 The Great Chapter, and this album, they've almost basically redeemed themselves. This album reminds me of why I love Slipknot so much. So yeah, I'm feeling a solid 8 on this album. That's my rating. What would you rate this album? Thank you for watching this video. That's my review of We Are Not Your Kind by Slipknot. Put in the comments section below what album you would like me to review as a request review, and the next album I will be reviewing will probably be the album Atonement by Killswitch Engage. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please subscribe, watch my other videos, share it with your friends, do whatever you want, and that's pretty much it. 3, 2, 1, I'm done. Subscribe.